The delegation arrived on a Tuesday, which is the worst possible day for anything significant to happen at Orithketh Relay Station, because Tuesday is when the tertiary coolant loop needs its pressure bleed, and the South Array's harmonic dampers need manual recalibration, and I had been planning that work since Saturday. I was 3 panels deep into the maintenance bay's lower service corridor when Pearl found me. Pearl is the station's administrative coordinator, a Velinari woman who has worked at Orithketh for longer than I have, and who communicates urgency through the quality of her silence rather than through anything she says outright. She stood at the corridor mouth with her hands folded in front of her and said nothing, and I knew from the precise degree of her stillness that I needed to put down the calibration wand. "Director wants you," she said, when I had stood up and begun working the access panel back into its frame. "I have the South Array harmonic." "Now," she said, "clean your hands." There is a sink at the east end of the maintenance bay where I wash down before going into any part of the station that belongs to people who are not me. I went to it and ran water over my hands and got most of the thermal compound off my left palm, though the knuckle of my second finger kept a gray trace that I was unable to remove without the solvent I had left back in the corridor. I looked at it for a moment, decided it was acceptable, and followed Pearl. The station at Orithketh is a mid-size frontier relay hub, which means it is large enough to have a formal receiving room and small enough that the formal receiving room is also used for personnel reviews and inspection team meetings, and the occasional serious conversation that the director wants conducted somewhere with proper furniture. In 12 years, I had been summoned to that room exactly twice. Once when a containment seal I had certified failed 3 days later, and the audit needed my notation records, and once when a compact inspection team needed to verify the relay output logs, and I was the only technician who knew where the original archive was physically stored, because I had reorganized it 4 years ago in a way that made sense to me, but apparently to no one else. Both times the room had felt like a room where things were decided that had already been decided elsewhere. It felt that way again when I walked in, except this time there were people in it I had never seen before, and the room's quality had changed from the usual institutional weight to something I had no word for. 4 of them. 2 in the gray-silver travel attire that I would later learn was the Velmorin Court's standard for formal off-planet visits, standing at the room's east wall with their hands at rest, and their faces composed in the specific way that people compose their faces when they are waiting for something they would rather not be waiting for. A third, shorter, in darker formal dress with a pale insignia at the collar, an advisor's insignia, though I did not know that yet, standing beside the window with his hands behind his back and a document case under his left arm. And a fourth, seated at the room's central table in the chair that is usually empty when I am brought in. I noticed her hands first. They were folded on the table in front of her, and they were still in the specific way that stillness is when it is not an effort, not the stillness of someone performing patience, but the kind that comes from a person who has been genuinely quiet for long enough that quiet is their default. The hands were rose copper in tone, and the veins at the backs of them were faintly visible, and there was nothing performative about them at all. Then I noticed her face. She was perhaps 40 or perhaps older in the way that some people are older without showing the work of it. Rose copper skin, as I had seen in her hands. Deep black violet hair worn in a formal arrangement that had silver threaded through it at the temples, silver the way silver gets when it arrives through time rather than through styling, and pale silver eyes, the color of the Keth 7 sky in the early morning before the primary sun was fully up, that were doing careful quiet work on me from the moment I stepped through the door. I looked at Director Sell. He was standing at the side of the room, slightly back, and the quality of his standing was that of a man who understands the room is not his. "Davin Holt," he said, "please sit down." I sat. The woman across the table did not introduce herself, and no one introduced her to me. The man with the insignia at the collar opened his document case and placed a physical document on the table between us. A sealed document, the old formal kind, with 3 stamps in different inks that I did not know how to read. "Warrant Officer Holt," he said. "I'm not a warrant officer," I said. "I'm a relay technician." "The document," he said, with the patience of a man who has anticipated this response, "does not agree with that assessment." He opened it with the practiced ease of someone who has opened documents in front of uncertain parties many times. I looked at the text, because there was nothing else to look at, and the text was arranged in 3 columns of 3 languages, one of which was standard, and the standard column said the following in language that was precise and formal and entirely clear. That a bond compact, registered 11 years and 4 months ago at the Velmoran Accord Registry, named one Davin Holt, human male, born Keth7 Frontier Colony, as the compact husband of S7th Velmoran, Queen Regnant of the Velmoran Accord, under the provisions of Article 14 of the Accord's Compact Law, a provision permitting pre-registration of partnerships identified through bloodline resonance before co-presence confirmation is obtained, and that the compact remained legally open and unresolved due to the registered party's continued absence, and that the court had traveled to Orithketh Relay Station today to present the formal case for nullification on grounds of 11-year abandonment under Section 12 of the same article. I read it twice. I have a habit of reading things twice when I find them significant, which is the same habit that has caused me to reread maintenance logs before certifying them when every other technician I know certifies on first pass. It is not distrust of the document. It is the understanding that the second reading catches what the first reading anticipates. The second reading did not change anything. "I think," I said, "there has been a mistake." "There has not," said the man with the insignia. He identified himself as Senior Advisor Velthar. His voice had the quality of a person who has prepared a case thoroughly and is confident in every element of it, and who is not unkind, but who has a destination and intends to reach it efficiently. "The compact was registered when you were 29, Holt, by a court official acting under the Article 14 pre-registration provision. You were never formally notified at the time because the notification process failed at the relay level. A transmission disruption in the Keth sector that year caused the Velmoran registry to log you as unreachable." He paused. "You subsequently moved to Orithketh. The compact remained in the registry as an open matter. 12 years passed." I said nothing. I was looking at the document. "The compact is not contested," Velthar continued. "Its validity is not in question. What we are here to address is the co-presence confirmation requirement under Article 14, which specifies that the compact must be confirmed by both parties within 12 years of registration. You are approaching the outer boundary of that window. The court's recommendation, and my recommendation as Her Majesty's senior advisor, is that you consent to formal nullification, a witnessed signature. This closes cleanly, without consequence for any party, and you may return to your work." He produced a second document from the case and placed it beside the first. I looked at the woman across the table. She had not moved. She had not looked away from me since I sat down. Those pale silver eyes were doing their quiet work, and I could not read what the work was, only that it was happening. "Is she?" I started. "Her Majesty S7th Velmoran," Velthar said, with the specific precision of a man heading off an imprecise question, "is present today as a courtesy. The court's view is that the matter is straightforward enough that her presence is not required, but Her Majesty wished to be here. She is not required to speak." "I didn't ask if she was required," I said. I was still looking at her. "I asked," I stopped, because the sentence I had been forming was "I asked if you knew this was happening," which was a foolish sentence because she was obviously here and obviously knew, and I am, as I have always been, more comfortable with relay diagnostics than with words in front of people. I started over. I'm sorry, I said. I don't know what the right thing to do is here. She looked at me for a moment. The pale silver eyes were steady. I know, she said. It was the first thing she had said since I entered the room. Velthar's face registered the statement and filed it without visible reaction. He pressed on. The nullification simply requires. Leave us, she said. The room changed in the way rooms change when a person who has actual authority says something, which is different from the way rooms change when a person who has formal authority says something. The change is not in the volume or the posture. It is in the air. Velthar's face went through several careful transitions. Your Majesty, the protocol for co-presence proceedings requires. Velthar, she did not raise her voice. There was no edge in it. It was the same quiet voice she had used for those 2 words, and it simply had a direction now. Leave us, please. He left. The 2 figures in gray-silver travel attire followed. Director Cell looked at me with an expression I could not immediately interpret, somewhere between professional neutrality and the private concern of a man who has managed my personnel file for 12 years, and is not certain this situation falls within the scope of that file. And then he also left. The door closed. I was alone in the formal receiving room of Orith-Keth Relay Station with a queen. There was still gray compound on my second knuckle. She looked at my hands, not in a critical way, in the way she had been looking at everything since I came in, noting it, filing it. What were you doing when they found you? She said. South array harmonic dampers, I said. They need manual recalibration every Tuesday. The tertiary coolant loop pressure builds across the week, and if you don't bleed it by Tuesday afternoon, you lose 0.4 efficiency on the transmission. Over a month that compounds into something you notice in the signal quality, and once you notice it in the signal quality, you're already 3 weeks behind where you should have been. She nodded, not the nod of someone being polite, but the nod of someone confirming that what they have heard matches what they expected to hear, and filing it. How long have you been at this station? She said. 12 years. And before that? 4 years on the Velsar relay network. Before that, I was at Keth 7 doing installation maintenance for the colony's power distribution system. I've been doing relay and environmental systems work since I was 23. She absorbed this, 20 years. More or less, yes. We were quiet for a moment. I had the sense that she was not thinking, that she had already done her thinking, at some earlier point, at a distance of some number of light hours, but was giving me space to understand the conversation at whatever speed I needed. It was an unusual quality in my experience. Most people who need something from you fill silence with the thing they need. I'm going to tell you what I know about you, she said, and I'd like you to tell me if it's accurate. I said nothing, which she appeared to take as agreement. You arrived at Orith-Keth 12 years ago on a standard Frontier Relay Technician's contract, 6 months renewable, she said. You extended that contract 7 times before it was converted to an open-term posting. The station's overall operational reliability rating, the compact standard metric, transmission quality, uptime, maintenance lag, has improved by 11% since your first year here, with the largest single improvement occurring in your 4th year, when you rebuilt the Eastern relay coupling mounts without being asked, using surplus materials from a decommissioned array unit that had been logged as scrap. She paused. You have filed maintenance logs on 46 systems not included in your contract scope, for no additional compensation, because the logs needed filing. She paused again. 3 years ago, when the Kethoran humanitarian relay failed and this station had to redirect power from non-essential systems, you ran the rerouting sequence personally over a 16-hour period, then filed the restoration work the following morning without requesting emergency pay classification. The restoration was performed so cleanly that the power transfer audit found nothing to flag. I was looking at the table. The station's commissary manager, she continued, A Velinari woman named Sova has indicated in the station's social record that you are the only technician in 12 years who learned every staff member's name within the first month and used each one correctly, including the 3 staff members who have names with Velinari tonal distinctions that are difficult for human speakers. She paused one more time. You have received 4 formal commendations for technical excellence in 12 years. You declined to have 2 of them entered in your personnel file. The station director's notation on the matter says, and I am quoting directly, Holt said the work was simply what the work was and didn't require a flag. She stopped. The room was quiet. The ventilation system made its low cycling sound, which I knew, because I know this station, indicated that the intake filter on the 3rd floor residential wing was 2 weeks from needing replacement. Is that accurate? She said. Most of it, I said. The efficiency improvement is closer to 9%. The Eastern coupling rebuild used some materials I sourced separately, not just the scrap unit. And Sova's name isn't in the social record, she told you directly, or someone who spoke to her did. A pause. Yes, she said, someone who spoke to her did. I looked up. How long have you been reading my station's records? 11 years, she said. The room was very quiet for a long moment. The compact, I said, you didn't have to come. Velthar said the nullification is clean, if you signed it. If I signed it, she said, you could go back to your harmonic dampers and this would never have happened, and that would be one way for this to end. Why didn't you? She looked at me with those pale silver eyes, and for the first time since I came in there was something in them that was not purely documentary, not soft and not asking for anything, but something that was its own thing. Because, she said, I am a competent queen. I govern 7 systems. I conduct treaty negotiations and trade balance reviews and border defense coordination and diplomatic correspondence, and I do all of these things to the standard my council considers adequate and that I consider sufficient. I have been doing it alone for 11 years, she paused, and in those 11 years I have met a very large number of people who do their work to the standard required. They are paid to do it. The standard is what the payment covers. Beyond the standard is someone else's problem. She looked at me steadily. I have also read 11 years of maintenance logs from a frontier relay station in the Keth sector, where one technician files work on systems outside his scope, for no additional pay, because the work needs doing and he was the person who noticed it. Another pause. I came to Orith Keth to see whether the person in those logs was the person you are. I said nothing. He is, she said. I had no answer to that. I am not good at things said directly to me about myself, as opposed to things said about the systems I maintain. I know how to respond to a relay coupling diagnostic, because the diagnostic speaks in a language I am fluent in: numbers, variances, tolerances, the gap between measured and specified. I do not have a fluent language for a queen telling me she has been reading my maintenance logs for a decade. I'm only a repairman, I said. It was not a deflection. It was the most accurate statement I could make about myself at that moment, which is the only kind of statement I know how to make. I fix things that are broken. I maintain systems so they keep running. I don't know. I stopped. I tried again. I don't know what a repairman is supposed to be to a queen. She looked at me for a long moment. The pale silver eyes were steady and not unkind. Let me tell you what I know, she said. A queen governs systems. Laws, trade routes, treaty frameworks, defense structures, all of it is a system, and governing it means understanding which components are functioning, which are failing, and which are being held together by one person's attention beyond what they were contracted to provide. She folded her hands on the table again. I have been reading people for 11 years through the gap between what they are required to do and what they actually do. That gap tells you more about a person than any formal assessment ever will. She paused. Your gap, Davin Holt, is very wide. My name, in her voice, landed differently than I expected. I noted it the way I note an anomaly in a diagnostic reading, not alarmed, just aware that something has registered that I did not fully anticipate. The bond compact, she said, uses a bloodline resonance protocol. The Velmoran registrars describe it as identifying depth of character, which is a formal phrase for something plainer. What it actually does, and I have read the technical literature, is flag individuals who have a consistent pattern of acting beyond the observed expectation, with no performance of the fact. She looked at me. You do not perform your work for anyone. You file logs no one asked for. You repair systems no one told you to repair. You decline commendations because you believe the work doesn't require recognition. None of that is strategy. It is simply what you are. I don't know how to be otherwise, I said. I know, she said, the same 2 words as before in the same register. And they meant what they had meant the first time. I have been watching long enough to know exactly that, and it is precisely what I came here to confirm. We sat for another quiet stretch. The maintenance bay was waiting for me 2 corridors away, and the south array dampers were still 3 positions from completion, and there was a part of my attention that was simply noting this the way it always notes things that remain unfinished. But there was another part that was in the room, and it was more present than I am usually present in rooms that are not maintenance bays. Velthar will want a decision, I said eventually. Yes, she said. His case is legally correct. You said so yourself. 11 years is grounds for nullification. It is. Then why? I stopped. I was asking the same question again. She had already answered it, and I was circling it the way I circle a diagnostic reading that I have already confirmed, looking for the anomaly I might have missed, which is a useful habit in relay work and was apparently also a habit in other things. What happens after, I said, if the nullification doesn't go through, practically? There is a formal recognition period, she said, 90 days. The compact is legally confirmed, but the social and administrative dimensions are handled gradually, with both parties' input on what a confirmed compact means in practice. The court has provisions for this, for compact situations where the parties are unfamiliar to each other. She paused. It is not rushed. It is not imposed. The 90 days are for both of us to understand what we are to each other. And then, she said, whatever that is. I thought about that. I thought about what I wanted, which is a question I am not practiced at. The work at Orithketh is known to me. The systems, the tolerances, the recurring maintenance windows, the way the south array behaves in the 3rd week of every month when the thermal differential between the outer hull and the transmission core creates a specific resonance that needs damping if you catch it early and replacing if you don't. I know this station the way I know the 12 years of my own maintenance logs. I know what is failing and what is holding and what will need attention in 2 weeks. I did not know what I wanted beyond the work. I had not thought about it clearly since I was 23 and took the first relay job because it suited my technical training, and the Keth 7 economy did not have many other openings that year. I had extended the contract and extended it again, and somewhere in the extensions the work had become simply what my life was, which is not a complaint and not a regret, only an observation about how things accumulate. I'd like to finish the south array calibration, I said. Today, it still needs doing regardless of whatever else is happening. She looked at me and there was something in the pale silver eyes that was almost not quite a smile. I know, she said. Go and do it. I'll speak to the station director. All right, I said. She stood when I stood, and I did not know if that was a courtesy or a protocol, and it didn't seem like the right moment to ask. I moved toward the door, and then I stopped because there was something I needed to ask before I went back to the maintenance bay. The logs, I said. Did you read all of them? All the ones that were filed, she said. Including the notation about the water filtration unit in the residential section. My 3rd year. It wasn't my system. Including that one, she said. It was the first log I read that made me understand what kind of person I was dealing with. She paused. The pressure variance had been visible in the monitoring data for approximately 8 weeks before you filed it. Someone else had been aware of it and had not filed. I know, I said. I never found out who. Does it matter? I thought about it. No, I said. The filter needed doing. Yes, she said. And for the first time she did smile, a small, precise thing, not performed, just present. Go to your dampers. I went. In the corridor, Velthar was standing with his document case and his case, and the two figures in gray-silver were behind him, and Director Sell was at the wall. They all looked at me as I came out of the room. I said nothing to any of them. I went back to the maintenance bay and picked up my calibration wand and finished the South Array harmonic damper recalibration, which took another hour and 40 minutes and came in at 0.4 above the Tuesday baseline, which is correct. I was running the post-calibration check on the coupling assembly when I heard footsteps in the outer corridor, and then Director Sell appeared at the bay entrance. "Halt," he said. I looked up. "She's asked for the station's formal witness protocol," he said. His voice had the quality he uses when he is being professionally precise about something he is personally uncertain about, which happens rarely. "She wants me to serve as witness for a co-presence confirmation under the Velmoran Compact Law." I put down the wand. I stopped. "That means the nullification isn't happening." "That appears to be correct," he said. I stood up and followed him back to the receiving room corridor, which is where they were, the Queen and Velthar, and the two figures in gray-silver, all standing in the corridor with the kind of arrangement that forms around something significant happening in a small space. Velthar looked at me when I arrived, and he had the quality of a man who has had enough time to complete a recalibration. His case had been correct. His case was still legally correct. What had changed was not the law but the variable his model had not included, and he was a thorough enough man to accept that without requiring it to become personal. She looked at me, those pale silver eyes steady, with the decision in them that had been there since I first sat down. "Halt," Velthar said, with professional precision. "The co-presence confirmation under Article 14 requires the bond phrase to be spoken in the registered language by both parties before a named witness. The confirmation is then filed with the registry and the compact stands." He paused. "This is not the nullification." "I understood that," I said. He inclined his head. Director Sell positioned himself at the corridor wall with his notation pad, because Sell is a thorough witness and always has been. She turned to me fully, and the corridor was very quiet, and I was aware of the ventilation cycling and the distant sound of the station's Eastern relay array transmitting on its regular schedule, which is the sound Orith Keth makes when everything is working the way it should. "I said to you," I said, "that I'm only a repairman." "Yes," she said. "I meant it. I don't know how to be anything else. I don't know protocol or diplomacy or whatever it is that a person is supposed to know in your position." "I know," she said. "I fix things," I said. "That's what I do. I notice what's failing and I fix it. I maintain what's running so it keeps running. I don't know what that makes me to you." She looked at me for a moment that was long enough that I became aware of its length, and then she said, very quietly in Velmoran, a language I do not speak, but 4 syllables that I would know again if I heard them, formal and plain at the same time, followed by my name, said the way she had been saying it all afternoon, with the specific weight of something carried for a long time and finally set down. Velthar was quiet for a moment. Then, in the voice of a man performing his professional function precisely, she says, "No, you are my husband." I looked at her. She looked at me. Director Sell was writing in his notation pad, because Sell is the kind of witness who writes while it's happening rather than after, which is the right way to do it. "All right," I said. She said the phrase again, in full, in Velmoran, and I said the standard equivalent that Velthar provided, and it was formal and not long and entirely clear. And Director Sell noted it and signed the notation, and the compact's co-presence confirmation existed now as a witnessed legal fact. Then it was over, which is to say that the formal part was over, and the corridor had the quality of a corridor again rather than a legal proceeding, and Velthar was documenting with the professional composure of a man who lost an argument he had prepared well and accepts the outcome, because the outcome was legal and witnessed and complete. He did not look at me with hostility. He looked at me the way a thorough person looks at the variable that invalidated their model, not with anger, but with the careful attention of someone updating their record to include the correct information. The two figures in gray-silver adjusted their posture slightly, and Director Sell finished his notation and closed his pad, and all of them had the quality of people who have been present for something significant and are now deciding what to do with themselves in the aftermath. She was looking at me and I was looking at her, and there was a long moment in which neither of us said anything, and it was not uncomfortable. It had the quality, that moment, of the pause after a diagnostic sequence completes and before you read the output, the space in which you know the work is done and are about to understand what it says. I have always found that pause useful. It is where you find what you actually know, as opposed to what you expected to know. What I actually knew was this. A queen with pale silver eyes had read 11 years of my maintenance logs, had traveled to a frontier relay station on a Tuesday, had sat across a table from a man with grease on his second knuckle, and asked him to tell her whether the logs were accurate, and had then stood in a corridor and spoken 4 syllables in her own language that meant something she had apparently been deciding to mean for a very long time. I did not know what to do with that. I am not a person who encounters large things and knows immediately what to do with them. I am a person who notes them, logs them, and continues doing the work that was already in progress, and trusts that the large thing will clarify itself in time the way pressure variances clarify themselves when you run the diagnostic twice. What does a repairman do now? I said. The same thing he did before, she said. For now, for the 90 days and past them, the work doesn't stop being the work. The south array still needs its post-calibration sign-off, I said. Go, she said. I'll be here when you're done. I went back to the maintenance bay and finished the post-calibration sign-off, and logged the damper readings, and noted the ventilation intake filter on the maintenance schedule for 2 weeks out. I sat on the service floor afterward with the log pad balanced on my knee and thought about what had just happened, which is not something I usually do, sit with a thing and think about it outside of its technical parameters. I am better at the parameters than I am at the sitting. But I sat, and I thought about 11 years of maintenance logs that a person had read, and about pale silver eyes that were steady, and about the specific quality of being seen accurately by someone who had gone to the trouble of understanding what they were looking at before they came to look. I thought about the water filtration unit in my 3rd year, and the pressure variance that had been visible for 8 weeks before I found it. I thought about the Kethoran rerouting sequence and the 16 hours, and the fact that I had not filed for emergency pay, because it had not occurred to me to think about that while I was running the sequence, only after, and by then the restoration was done and the filing seemed unnecessary. I thought about the 4 commendations and the 2 I had asked not to enter in my file, because the commendation form requires a description of why the work was exceptional, and I had not known how to write that description truthfully, because the work was not exceptional to me. It was just the work. She had read all of that. She had read it from 7 systems away, over 11 years, and she had come to Oreth Keth on a Tuesday to see whether the person in the logs was real. There was a knock at the maintenance bay door, which is not a common sound because most people who come to the maintenance bay don't knock. They either announce themselves from the entrance or they come in, depending on how well I know them. She knocked. She had changed out of the formal attire into something simpler and darker, and she came through the bay entrance with the same quality of attention she had brought to the receiving room, not performing interest in the space, just actually seeing it. She looked at the coupling assemblies along the south wall, and the tool mounting grid, and the panel access bays, and the calibration console in the center of the room with its display still showing the south array's post-calibration readings. "0.4 above baseline," I said. "Good," she said. She came to the console and looked at the readings. I had the impression she was actually reading them, not standing beside the console being politely interested while I explained them. She spent a moment longer on the transmission efficiency graph than most people would. "Your senior advisor," I said, "Velthar." "Yes. He's good at his job." "He is," she said. "He prepared a thorough case. He was not wrong about the legal framework. He just didn't know you'd read the logs." "He didn't," she said. "To be fair to him, it is not standard practice for a queen to spend 11 years reviewing the maintenance records of a frontier relay station in the hope that the compact's registered party would turn out to be worth the reading." She paused. "He had no reason to build that variable into his model." "Why did you," I said, "read them?" She considered this, actually considered it, in the way that people consider questions they have thought about before but want to answer accurately. "Because," she said, "a bond compact registered in my name is a serious matter, and I am a serious person, and when I have an open matter I address it rather than ignore it. At first I read the logs because they were what was available to me. You were here, and the station kept records, and the records were accessible. And then," she paused, "in your third year, there was a notation about a water filtration unit in the residential section, a system that was not yours. A pressure variance that had been flagged in the monitoring data for 8 weeks before you found it. You filed a full maintenance report, repaired the unit on your own time, and noted in the log that the previous monitoring data suggested the variance had been visible since early in the quarter." She looked at me. "You did not say who had failed to file it. You simply noted that the data was available and had not been acted on, and that the repair had been completed." "It had been completed," I said. "That's what the notation is for." "Yes," she said, "and that is precisely the thing." She turned slightly to face me more directly. "You did not assign blame. You did not flag the missed filing as a deficiency in the responsible party. You repaired the system and noted the fact and moved on, because the system was now running and the notation was accurate, and those were the things that mattered." She was quiet for a moment. "I have governed 7 systems for 11 years, and I can tell you that the instinct to repair without assigning blame is among the rarest things I have encountered in any person at any level of responsibility. Most people, when they find a problem someone else should have caught, use the finding to establish something about themselves relative to the person who missed it. You used it to file an accurate maintenance log." I had not thought about it that way. I had thought about it as, the filter needed fixing and I fixed it, and I wrote down that I fixed it, which is what the maintenance log is for. "The work is the work," I said. "Yes," she said, "that is what I mean." We were quiet for a while. The bay had the sound it always has at the end of a calibration session, systems settling into their post-work state, the faint harmonic of the relay array doing its transmission, the ventilation cycling its intake. I know every sound in this station the way I know the calluses on my hands. "What happens during the 90 days, I said. "Practically, I have a station to maintain." "The 90 days are structured to be as unintrusive as possible," she said. "The court has protocols for situations where one party in a compact confirmation is in an active posting. We are not expecting you to come to the capital immediately. There are communication channels, formal and informal and periodic visits, and a legal framework that handles the administrative dimensions in the background." She paused. "I will tell you plainly that I do not know what this is yet, beyond what it is legally. I know what the logs say. I know what I saw this afternoon. The 90 days are for both of us to understand what that becomes. That's honest, I said. I try to be, she said. So do I said. Which is why I need you to understand that I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. I don't have a register for courts or protocols. I fix relay arrays and maintain coolant loops and file maintenance logs, and I have been doing it for 20 years and I am good at it, and I don't know what else to offer. She looked at me steadily. Then offer exactly that, she said. A person who does the work because the work needs doing and does not stop doing it because the recognition fails to arrive is not a person who needs to be taught to be something else. They need to be given systems worth maintaining. Her pale silver eyes were very still. I have 7 systems, Davin. Some of them are failing in ways my current advisors cannot see because they are looking at the metrics rather than the logs. I thought about that. I thought about what it would mean to read the logs of 7 systems and find the pressure variances that had been visible for 8 weeks, but nobody had filed. I thought about the scope of that, which was larger than Orith-Keth by a significant order of magnitude, and about whether the habit of noticing things and fixing them translated across scales. I thought it probably did. The habit doesn't care about the scale. A pressure variance is a pressure variance whether it's in a water filtration unit on a frontier relay station or in a trade treaty framework governing 4 inhabited systems. I'd need to train someone for the relay work here, I said. The south array especially. The damper calibration sequence is specific, and I've documented it, but you need someone who understands why the sequence matters, not just the steps. Yes, she said. That takes time. The 90 days are adequate for transition planning, she said. We are not asking you to leave tomorrow. The ventilation intake filter on the 3rd floor residential wing, I said. It needs replacing in 2 weeks. Whoever takes this posting needs to know that. Something crossed her face that was very close to the smile from earlier, small, precise, and not performed at all. I will make a note, she said. And the south array, I said. 0.4 per day compounds, it's not optional. I understand, she said. Davin. She said my name the same way she had said it all afternoon, with the specific weight of something that has been held for a long time and is now being used. I am not asking you to stop being what you are. I am asking whether you might be it somewhere larger. I thought about that for a long time, or what felt like a long time, which may have been 30 seconds. All right, I said. She nodded, not the nod of a person who has won something, the nod of a person who has confirmed an accurate reading. I'll speak to Velthar, she said. He'll have the administrative documents ready by morning. The 90-day period begins when you're ready for it, not when I am. She moved toward the bay entrance and then stopped, the same way I had stopped in the corridor earlier. The filter, she said without turning. 3rd floor residential, 2 weeks. Yes, I said. I'll remember, she said, and she left. I sat in the maintenance bay for a while longer. The south array was calibrated. The coolant loop was bled. The post-calibration sign-off was logged. The ventilation filter was on the schedule. Everything that needed to be functioning was functioning, and the things that would need attention in 2 weeks were noted, and the transition documents for whoever took over this posting would be thorough enough that they could maintain the station correctly without needing to reinvent anything I had learned. I picked up my calibration wand and started the instrument check, because the instrument check needed doing, and I was still here, and it was still Tuesday. The compact was confirmed. Director Sell had his notation in his records. Velthar had his co-presence documentation and would file it with the Velmoran registry before the morning. The south array was running at correct efficiency. The residential wing filter was on the schedule. I am a relay technician. I am also, apparently and legally and now in a way I had not expected this Tuesday to contain, a compact husband to a queen who read 11 years of my maintenance logs and came to a frontier station to see whether the person who filed them was real. I finished the instrument check and racked the wand and turned off the bay's work lights. In the corridor, the station hummed the way it hums when it is well maintained, which is a sound that most people who live in it stop noticing after the first year. I have never stopped noticing it. It is the sound of systems running correctly because someone is paying attention to them, and I have always found it more comfortable than silence. Down the corridor, in the direction of the station's guest quarters, there was a light still on. I walked back to my quarters and wrote the Tuesday maintenance summary and added the residential filter to the 2-week schedule and noted the next south array calibration window. I went asleep, and in the morning the station was still running, and the relay was still transmitting, and the south array dampers were holding correctly. I started making a list of everything I would need to put in the transition document, and of all the systems in this station that needed to be understood rather than just operated, and of how to explain to someone else the difference between those two things, which is the same difference, I thought, as the one between reading the logs and reading the metrics, which is a distinction I had never tried to put into words before because no one had ever read the logs. Someone had read the logs. I added the ventilation filter to the list, with the replacement window and the part number and the access panel sequence, and I noted that the pressure reading in the tertiary coolant loop should be checked first thing on Mondays so that the Tuesday bleed is not a surprise. I noted the south array's thermal differential behavior in the 3rd week of the month. I noted the eastern relay coupling mounts, and the fact that the standard fastener torque specification is slightly too high for the alloy used in the Orithketh units, which is a detail I had discovered in my 4th year, and corrected with a modification that is not in any official document, but is in my personal maintenance notes, which I would include in the transition file. I thought about 7 systems with their own pressure variances and monitoring data and unfiled notations, and about the fact that the habit of reading logs rather than metrics is a habit that scales, and about what it would mean to look at the gap between what a diplomatic treaty is required to do and what it is actually doing, and whether the same instinct that had made me fix the residential water filter applied to fixing things that were larger and more consequential. I thought it probably did. The work is the work, at whatever scale you encounter it. I thought about pale silver eyes that were steady and not performing anything, and about being told that you are my husband in a language you do not speak and understanding it completely regardless. Then I went a fine Velthar, because there were administrative documents to begin, and I am not a person who leaves things unstarted when they need starting. And then, after that, I went a brief parallel on the transition planning, because Peril would need to know, and because she had worked at this station longer than I had and deserved to hear it from me directly. She listened with her hands folded in front of her and her face in the quality of stillness she produces when she is processing something significant, and when I finished she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Will the South Array documentation be part of the transition file?" "Yes," I said. "The Monday pressure check notation?" "Yes." "Good," she said. And she went back to her work, because that is what Peril does, and it is one of the things I have always appreciated about her. Outside the station, through the east window of the administrative corridor, the relay array was doing its transmission, and the Keth sector sky was the color it gets in the late afternoon when the light is coming at the angle that makes the dust in the upper atmosphere scatter gold. I have looked at that sky from this window for 12 years. It is an ordinary sky for an ordinary station on the frontier of 7 systems that are governed now by someone who reads maintenance logs. I went back to my quarters and filed the Tuesday summary and started the transition document, and did not think about what came next in the way that a person worries about what comes next, because worrying about what comes next has never been my habit. My habit is to note what needs doing, do it, and log it accurately. What needed doing was the transition document. After that, there would be something else that needed doing, and I would do that too. The relay was transmitting, The dampers were calibrated, the station was running. It was, all things considered, a productive Tuesday.